Hi, good afternoon. Hey, it's Thursday. This is Patricia, and we're talking everything diabetes. We're really going to start talking on Thursdays as we do our videos about how we deal with diabetes. I think that's really important. Not just how we deal with it with medicine and blood sugars, things like that, but how we deal with it in many, many different ways, because I think we all tend to focus on diet, exercise, blood sugar counts, and all that, which are obviously very important. But I think there's a whole other side that we really can explore more, and I don't hear a lot about it on social media or in some of the diabetes magazines and journals. They sort of tend to gloss over it briefly. So today we're talking about doing diabetes your way, and I'll start with a story. Kind of goes back to my diagnosis. So when I was first diagnosed, I was a nurse working in the emergency department in Dallas, and I happened to work every shift with a very dear friend who had type 1 diabetes. And so she was diabetic long before I was, and I worked with her nearly every shift. She trained me actually at the beginning quite a bit. But as I started to develop signs and symptoms, and when we finally started insulin, she was right there really wanting to be supportive and really wanting to be helpful. And I was super resistant because at the time I was not having insulin or needles or any of that stuff. But I tell you this story because I want to talk about how much I compared myself to her. So she was my go-to expert, and I had met other people. I'd certainly taken care of a lot of patients, worked with several people that had diabetes, but she was the one who I knew really intimately, and I knew the ins and outs, and I saw her check her blood sugar and everything. So I compared myself a lot to her. And I found a lot of things. We were not the same at all. Our insulin requirements were so different. Our doctors had us set up on different regimes. I ended up going on a pump a lot sooner than she did. She'd had that since she was a kid. And so she kind of had her system down. And so it was interesting because we would look at how each other were doing different things and how we checked and what devices she used and what things I were using. So we tended to compare ourselves a lot. And there's a blessing and a curse in doing that. And that's really what I want to get into today, is how we compare ourselves. You know, a lot of times, of course, when we meet somebody else, there's an instant kindred, kinship. So you see somebody pull out their pump, I am the first one to go up and introduce myself and say, hey, I get you, because there's that instant connection and that somebody else who knows what it's like to walk in your shoes. And that is wonderful. And I would say never give that up. But I also see a lot of information, especially on social media, with people asking, how many carbs should we eat per day? And what's your insulin ratio supposed to be like? And what is the perfect diet, right? So there's a lot of people and asking questions, they're curious, they want to know, they're trying to figure out what's going on with other people. But there's a little bit of a risk in doing that because everybody is not the same. They're not. It's amazing to me as I work with people, with clients who have diabetes, and again, looking at patients over the years, the impact that insulin resistance plays, the impact that your physical makeup, how much muscle and or fat that you have the level of activity certainly plays a part, and really just all these different factors, your age certainly, so whether you have hormonal issues, things like that. But each individual person is truly unique. And so when we start comparing ourselves, what happens a lot of times is we get worried that we're not doing it right. And so I guess this post is really to assure you that you need to do it your way and figure things out. So it's great to get all this information from other people and look at a wide array of opportunities, options, possibilities. And then you really have to do the hard work, which is the next step of figuring out what really works for you. And that's something that's going to take collaboration with your provider. So what sort of insulin is better for you, the location that you're going to inject, what sort of oral medications, what carbohydrates you can do, not do, how much exercise or insulin you need to bring your blood sugar down. All those things are so widely varied. So you can't cookie cutter that from someone else. And I think that's the unfortunate piece, because we're all seeking answers and we look at other people and try to figure out if the way they do it will work for us. And my finding is that it doesn't, that you really have to figure out what works for you with the foods you like, with your schedule, with your work, with your kids, just everything that plays into it. Requires your own interpretation of how diabetes works for you and your own management of it day by day. I think the other thing that's interesting is all the information that's out there. So if you look online, I've been doing some research on people that are selling diabetes products, right? And so some people say if you eat a lot of sugar, that causes insulin resistance, and there's studies to back it up. I look at a similar website that says, no, it's not the sugar, it's the fat that causes insulin resistance. Some people say keto's the way to go. Others are like, don't do keto because you could go into DKA. So it's really scary because there's no one definitive answer. And as we look out there, trying to find ways to battle this thing that feels like it's unattainable and that we're unable to basically grab onto and wrestle down, if you will, right? So it's not always the same, and every day it's going to be different. So I would just invite you to be very curious about what everybody else is doing. It's fun to hear what other people do, and I'm always amazed at like, oh my gosh, you only take that much for a piece of pizza where I take a lot more or a lot less. It's just amazing to me. But don't judge yourself and don't try to walk in someone else's shoes, because I think we can really get tripped up. So I think it's good information to find, but at the end of the day, you really have to figure out what works for you, you know, and what you like to do. So trying to emulate somebody else who's a marathon runner and you're not into running, it's probably not going to work, right? So you have to find out what works for you. So as you deal with your diabetes every day, make sure that you're doing it on your terms in ways that are very meaningful to you and things that you understand. And so you can keep doing them. And if there are habits you need to change, do them slowly. And again, be curious. Start looking at how are some ways that you can make small changes, because those small changes are going to lead you down a path where after days, so much time passes, there'll be bigger changes. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next Thursday. Take care. Bye.